It was being set up and then it was being broken down, so we were really just on standby. And of course then when it happened, Jacinda Ardern and Bill English found out at the same time as the rest of New Zealand, which I think is quite extraordinary.
Quite a lot still, though, that is in a limbo of sorts, if you like. Still not really any decisions around ministers' portfolios, certainly nothing that's been made public yet.
That's right. So we have the numbers. New Zealand First will have coalition cabinet ministers, 4 and an undersecretary, and the Greens will have 3 ministers outside of cabinet under a confidence and supply agreement, plus an undersecretary. So we have, that's about the level of detail in terms of those ministerial portfolios. This is a bit unusual. When we normally have a deal like this, we have the agreement, we have the portfolios, and you can see the whole picture. But Labour will go into a caucus meeting this afternoon to choose its own cabinet positions. The New Zealand First and Greens will not be decided until later next week, and we actually won't get the details of those policy positions the policy agreements until next week either.
Our political editor, Jane Patterson. Jane is also staying with us for the rest of Morning Reports. We'll be able to go back to her for analysis right throughout the morning. It's 7:17.
All right, let's broaden out this conversation now. We've got political scientist Jennifer Curtin here with me in Auckland. Good morning to you, Jennifer.
Good morning.
John Johansson in the Wellington studio. He's from Victoria University. Good morning to you, John.
Yeah, morning, Guy.
And the Otago University Professor of Public Law, Andrew Geddes from the Dunedin studio. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Yeah, good morning, Guy.
Yeah, if I could start with you, John, just for some historical and some context here, Jacinda Ardern to be the next Prime Minister, how would you characterise it in terms of a moment?
One of the most significant moments this country has seen for 3 or 4 decades, Guy, because she does herald that generational shift which we last saw in 1984 with the 4th Labour government, but of course that shift is taking place under very different situational, conditions, far more benign than the drama of 84. But nonetheless, we're seeing political regeneration. And I think in some of those comments you got out there on the street reflected that, the sense that there's something new and fresh happening.
And Jennifer, as John says there, a generational shift, but one delivered by someone at the other end of the generation. So an interesting sort of midwife that he played there in a way.
Yeah, I suppose we can think of it like that, but I think in a way both Winston Peters and Jacinda Ardern understand the MMP system in a way that perhaps a lot of other politicians don't. So we have to remember that Jacinda Ardern actually hasn't voted herself in a first-past-the-post election, and in a way Winston's career has been regenerated with the advent of MMP. So while they're generations apart in age, you could actually see them as products of the MMP system, and so both of them get it in a way the traditional parties with long-standing members may not.
Isn't it interesting, though? We don't actually know what we've got, do we, in terms of the policy? I mean, we were told it's all about policy, but we don't actually know now, sitting here this morning, what on earth that they've agreed to, do we?
We don't know the detail. I think that if you before the final result came out yesterday, if you looked at Peters' policies or New Zealand First policies and you looked at Labour's, there was quite a bit of connection between the two, apart from water tax, say, and some of the agricultural regional sorts of issues. So yes, we don't know the detail, but I think we have to remember that we haven't seen this kind of arrangement.
No, we haven't.
Before.
And I want to come to you, Andrew, in just a second, but I'm going to come back to you first, John, because it is interesting, isn't it? We there's a lot we don't know, and that is different this time. We don't even know who the Deputy Prime Minister is going to be. Labour goes in today to an election, effectively, for its cabinet positions. Someone like Kelvin Davis doesn't know whether to try to grab the Deputy Prime Minister or does he grab Māori Affairs, because he doesn't know what Winston's going to do. So there's a lot that's unclear still, isn't there?
Yeah, sure. But, one of the things that I celebrated during the interregnum, opposite to how many felt, was just really the celebration of inactivity and the fact that this country manages to survive very well.
We did all right, didn't we?
Without being told what to do and what to think every day. So I have no trouble whatsoever waiting till next week to get the bones on this.
Oh, for sure. I'm not saying that. It's not impatience. It's just the strategy of Peters, because he's sitting there. He hasn't accepted any portfolios,
sure.
and the Labour guys are going in there, and they don't know which one he's going to take. Right?
But this is also predictable, I think, Guyon, because if you look at the alternative coalition operation, you had a lead party that was very used to governing, very set in its ways, and that would have been seamless. This was always hastily thrown together, most magnified by Jacinda Ardern coming in when she did. So in a sense, she was sitting on top of somebody else's Labour Party. So of course there's a lot more uncertainty and fluidity in trying to, make solid what has just been really done on the fly.
Andrew Geddes, if I could bring you in, and this might sound like a simple or even a stupid question, but are the Greens part of this government?
Yes and no. The three Green MPs who are ministers will be part of the government. However, the Green Party, because it's giving supply and confidence, has the ability to, on issues outside of those ministerial portfolios, take their own position and, oppose government policies. We've seen this before.
Yeah, we have. But and why I'm going down this track is because we heard from Winston Peters last night when he made this decision that he said, quote, "We are in coalition with the Labour Party. They, that is the Greens, are outside government in support of that." But when you read the Cabinet Manual, it says that every member of the executive is a member of the government. So they are in the government, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, they are. I mean, it's something that New Zealand has developed that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, this half-in, half-out kind of arrangement where the party giving supply and confidence, because they have ministers in the government, and those ministerial portfolios are bound to the government, but outside of those ministerial portfolios are free to go their own way. We've developed it because it allows parties to retain some individuality. But in this case, it allows Winston Peters to say, I'm at the real heart of government. I'm the important one in this relationship. Those Greens, I'm keeping them at arm's length. That's why he's saying that.
Okay. Let's look at some of the hopes and positive things about what you think might happen, and then I want to close by looking at some of the challenges. So, Jennifer, I could start with you. What do you think this government is going to focus its energies on first up and make a real priority of? Because those perceptions and starting strong is pretty important, isn't it?
Yeah, so they've laid out fairly early on what their 100 days in office are going to achieve. And I think it's going to be pretty domestically focused and probably more in the social policy side of things. So we'll see the discussion around the minimum wage increase. We'll see conversations about and needing to start up the investigation into state care. We'll see the Pike River discussion happen, and we'll also, I think, the tax working group, who's going to be on that and looking at that, and there are some real important business leaders who want to be involved.
It doesn't sound that bold, though, does it? I'll bring you in too, John, here. I mean, what do you think?
100 days is defined by action, which is hardly ever going to be fulfilled by filling rooms with committees. So I think, you'll see some symbolic things. Perhaps on that early agenda will be to, return contributions to the super things that we can point to as clear changes of direction. Because if I could just come back for a minute, that the kicker really was yesterday, that final peroration of Winston's speech of the modified status quo versus change. So whatever this mix of action is in the first 100 days, it is really going to have to signify and underpin that idea of more substantive change than just, switching from red from blue to red.
Well, that's right, isn't it? Because he said, Winston Peters said the clincher for him was, as you say, a modified status quo or real change. Do you think it's going to be a bold government?
I do think that over time, once it finds its feet, because, there is an enormous management challenge here, right? And what is going to be unique in our politics, our post-MMP politics, is working in that space between Labour and New Zealand First and the Greens, because of the history, but also because of the hasty way that this government has sort of really come together. So there's going to be enormous also focus on getting the people in seats, and the sort of, there's going to be a lot of risk management involved in trying to wrap those new ministers round with a lot of experience and practical wisdom to try and make it work, so that when they get to the House, there's a program ready to go and they know how they're going to get it through. Because one of the challenges is going to be National's strong oppositional position and its role, with select committees and what have you, Guy.
Exactly, and I want to come to you on that, Andrew, and then I'll come back to you, Jennifer. Andrew, we have not seen a position in the MMP yet where the largest party is in opposition. They will have 56 seats. ACT has one as well. A lot of Parliament has decided proportionally, isn't it? I mean, in terms of the funding as well. Your funding for your resource unit, your numbers on select committee, the number of questions you are allocated in the House. Now, with a monster opposition, they are going to be pretty powerful, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. They probably will be the best opposition that we've seen under MMP, simply because they will have that resourcing, they'll have the numbers, and they will be pretty much unified, at least certainly in the first little bit, until leadership issues maybe start to arise. So yeah, it's going to be tough for the new government because they're going to be under the pump right from the outset. Just one other thing to add into the mix of what do they have to deal with. There's certain things that they have to deal with because they're just on the horizon, and one of the big ones is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because there are meetings around that in mid-November, and decisions have to be made about how committed New Zealand is to that framework and how hard they want to push for changes in it. And that, I think, will be quite a big issue.
First test, maybe. Hey, just finally, Jennifer, what do you see as the major challenges for this? We've talked about a couple of those immediate ones, an international one, also facing a strong opposition. What do you think?
I think probably one of the external challenges might actually be how mainstream media manage to engage with her leadership in a way that doesn't invoke gender metaphors all the time and isn't always just talking about her age, and that they own the fact that she is the Prime Minister going forward, and give her some room to actually demonstrate leadership, both in terms of political management but also on the international stage.
Thanks very much to all of you. That is Jennifer Curtin, John Johansson and Andrew Geddes, all with us there. 7:28.
Well, New Zealand's next Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is now with us in the Wellington studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations. Not even 3 months into the job of Labour leader. How did you sleep last night?
Oh, look, certainly a lot to think about, a lot of planning, a lot of work to be done. I think I'll probably take time to reflect on this moment and indeed the campaign once Christmas arrives.
Yes, indeed. You said you enjoyed the theatre of Winston Peters' decision because you found out, along with the rest of New Zealand, how that played out. Just take us into the room. What was it like for the Labour caucus to be watching that happening on the live stream?
Yeah, of course, we, like the rest of New Zealand, we're anticipating for a little while what time that announcement may indeed be made. By that time, a small group of both staff and colleagues and my partner Clark had gathered together while we waited. And I have to say, it was during Mr Peters' opening comments and remarks that I really got a sense that really shared common ground, particularly around making sure that all New Zealanders benefited from economic prosperity. That was the moment that I thought, he's going with us.
So you guessed it before he actually said New Zealand First Labour.
I did.
What would you say to the people who are characterising this government that is about to get underway as the coalition of the losers?
Oh, look, obviously I would characterise that as unfair. This is an MMP environment. We've formed a coalition government based on the majority of votes and based therefore on what the majority of New Zealanders sought in this election.
How are you going to be stamping your authority on the administration in the first 100 days?
I've done that from the very beginning. I've led our negotiations, both with New Zealand First and with the Green Party. I've been there every single step of the way. I've set out the parameters on what I believed were the priorities for us, what we would not move on, what we could seek compromise on, but ultimately holding true to what we wanted to achieve collectively as a group of parties who campaigned hard for change over the election. And we did campaign individually, I must add, but that did still speak to the common ground that we had.
So which policy changes are going to be coming in that perhaps will be your priorities?
Those that we actually stipulated as we went into the election. Our 100-day plan remains with a few minor changes, but pretty much has remained intact. I will be releasing, though, we're finalising in the next 24 hours the detail of both agreements. Essentially, the agreement with the Green Party is complete, but with New Zealand First, we've got a few more details to iron out. Those will be released early next week. But in the meantime, I can tell you that the elements of that 100-day plan, much of it remains.
Are there more taxes on the cards? For example, is there going to be a water tax?
I have said this morning when asked publicly that our focus in talking about the water royalty was delivering clean rivers. There is common ground between all parties that we need to act in that area. We remain committed to cleaning up New Zealand rivers, but I absolutely reflect now that Mr Peters did take a strong view on the mechanism that we were choosing to use. So you will see what's happened in that final agreement. I'll leave it till then, but I'm happy to share that yes, that was a firm view he took, and we have ensured though that we've balanced that with our view that we need to clean up our rivers and lakes.
Is it fair to say then that that water tax you talked about, 1 or 2 cents, that is going to change?
It's fair to say Mr Peters was very strong on that issue, but we've managed to ensure that the principle of cleaning up New Zealand's rivers and lakes, that remains.
Is it going to be a situation where it is a charge on water bottling that is then going to be going overseas, or is that, for example, how this is perhaps shifted slightly?
Oh, look, it'll be obvious to members of the public who heard parties talk about this that there was common ground on the issue of the unfairness in the way that water bottlers were being treated. There is common ground there. But look, I will leave that detail to the time that we publicly release those agreements.
Okay, what about the regional fuel tax in Auckland? Is that going ahead?
Again, I want to leave the rest of those details until we release those agreements. Again, though, reflecting the fact that common ground around improving transport options, rail is a strong theme and will be a strong theme of this government.
Is it fair to say again that regional fuel tax then has changed or is off the table?
Again, we'll wait until those agreements are publicly released early next week, but I can assure you there'll be plenty of announcements in the meantime. We do need to release the ministerial portfolios that will be held by our support partners, and then again we'll be releasing the fuller ministerial portfolios later in the week.
Your cabinet, how many slots are there going to be for Labour MPs?
In cabinet, traditionally of course, most cabinets have numbered 20. 4 will be held by New Zealand First, the remaining 16 by Labour. So outside of cabinet, traditionally there's been 8 members. 3 will be held by the New Zealand Green Party, 5 will be held by the Labour Party.
Okay. Are you hoping Winston Peters will take on that role of Deputy Prime Minister?
It's being offered to him. That is his decision.
But do you want him to actually take it up?
I wouldn't have offered it to him if I did not think that was going to be something that would provide stable, workable, solid government.
Okay. Are you confident that your government is going to be able to go the distance of the full 3 years with New Zealand First?
Absolutely. And there's a couple of reasons that I can say that with confidence. The first is the nature of the agreements. The second is the relationships I formed with the leaders of both parties. One is long-standing, and the other, I think, has a very firm foundation based on these negotiations. And the final reason, Labour has been in an agreement with New Zealand First before. As Helen Clark has often reflected, Mr Peters and New Zealand First were a party of their word. They provided stability, and we presented and delivered a stable government in 2005.
Did it go the full distance?
It went the full distance.
What about the congratulations that have been coming in? We spoke to Helen Clark a little bit earlier on this morning. She is delighted, as you would imagine. Also, Justin Trudeau, I see, has tweeted about this. Have you personally heard, or who have you personally heard from?
Yeah, so far the first I had contact with were Australian leaders, Bill Shorten and Malcolm Turnbull, which I appreciate. That is one of our most important international relationships, and that will continue under my leadership. In fact, I flagged last night I'm very keen to make a trip to Australia as soon as I am able. I've also heard from the likes of Theresa May. It is early days, so certainly likely to have a few more conversations.
Have you heard from the United States and Donald Trump?
Not as yet.
Would you take his call?
Oh, absolutely. I am here to pursue New Zealand's interests. That is my role. Regardless of whether or not we always share the view of other political leaders, I will always pursue what's in the interest of New Zealand.
And just a final question. When you're in Wellington, Premier House, the residence?
Oh, yeah, decisions haven't really been made, but I can tell you that last night I headed straight back to my studio apartment in Wellington and had a pot of noodles.
Congratulations on the job. Thank you very much for coming into the studio this morning. That's Jacinda Ardern, the next Prime Minister of New Zealand. It's now 24 minutes to 8.
And coming up before 8, we'll talk to the Green Party leader, James Shaw, the former National Party.
There is common ground among the coalition partners on issues like water quality, but she wouldn't say whether the water tax will be dumped. The former Labour Prime Minister Helen Clark has congratulated Jacinda Ardern, describing her achievement as extraordinary. She told Morning Report Ms Ardern has brought the party from despair to government in just a few weeks, and by any measure that's incredible. The outgoing Prime Minister Bill English says the economy is in pretty good shape and provides many positive opportunities for an incoming government. He says national MPs were geared up to form a government but will now turn their skills to holding the new government to account. The New Zealand dollar has fallen following the announcement of the new government. The Kiwi has dropped to 4 and 5 month lows against the American and Australian dollars. A short time ago, it was trading at 70.1 US cents, about 2% down in the past 24 hours, and 89.1 cents against the Australian dollar. The Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has dismissed suggestions of any tensions with New Zealand's new Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. In August, Ms Bishop accused the Labour Party of colluding with the Australian Labour Party to dig up information on Barnaby Joyce's dual New Zealand citizenship. Ms Bishop has now congratulated Ms Ardern, and the Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull took to Twitter last night to congratulate Jacinda Ardern, saying he was looking forward to building on our two nations' great partnership. That's the news. Now the weather around the country today from Met Service. Kaitaia, Whangarei and Auckland. Mostly cloudy, chance of a shower. 17 for Kaitaia and Auckland, with 18 in Whangarei. Hamilton, Tauranga, Whakatane and Rotorua, mainly fine, possible showers from afternoon. 20 degrees for Hamilton, Tauranga and Whakatane on 17 and Rotorua on 18. Gisborne, the odd shower, clearing by evening, 15. Napier and Hastings, morning cloud, then fine and 16. Taupo, fine spells, chance of an afternoon shower and 19. Taumaranui, fine apart from possible morning fog and evening cloud, a high of 23. For New Plymouth, Whanganui, Palmerston North, also Levin and Kapiti, fine apart from morning and evening cloud. 18 degrees for New Plymouth and for Kapiti, 19 in Whanganui, 19 also in Levin with 20 in Palmerston North. Masterton, fine apart from morning fog, 21. Wellington, fine apart from morning and evening cloud and 18. Blenheim and Nelson, a sunny day, 22 for Blenheim with 19 in Nelson. Westport, Greymouth and Hokitika, fine apart from morning and evening cloud. 17 in Westport, 16 for Greymouth and Hokitika. Kaikoura, a sunny day and 18. Christchurch and Ashburton, fine. 16 for Christchurch with 21 in Ashburton. Timaru, fog clearing to fine this morning and 19. Oamaru, fine but low cloud possible this morning and afternoon, a high of 18. For Wanaka, Queenstown and Alexandra, a fine, warm day, high cloud this evening. 25 for Wanaka, 23 for Queenstown with 26 in Alexandra. Dunedin, fine with high cloud this evening, a high of 20. For Invercargill, a fine day but a few spots of rain this evening and a high of 22. It's 20 minutes to 8.
And as Morning Report, the Green Party late last night removed the final hurdle for the formation of the new Labour New Zealand First Greens government when its delegates ratified a confidence and supply agreement. Now, the agreement gives the Greens 3 ministers outside Cabinet and 1 undersecretary. The Green Party leader, James Shaw, is with us now. Congratulations.
Thank you, Guyan.
Are you in the government?
Yes, we are. By definition, having ministers means that we are a part of this government.
Does Winston Peters agree with that? Because his comment last night was, we're in coalition with the Labour Party. They, that's you, are outside government in support of that.
There's a spectrum with full coalition at one end and sitting on the crossbenches at the other. And we're sort of about halfway along that. I would have to say probably closer to the coalition end than the crossbenches end.
Peters goes on to say, we always wanted to be in coalition government with one party, not more. So it doesn't appear that the 3 parties agree who's actually in the government.
Well, we are in a confidence and supply arrangement with the Labour Party to make sure that they can pass their budgets. One of the advantages of confidence and supply is that it does give us the ability to be a bit more independent. And if you look at the history of MMP in New Zealand, it is kind of littered with small parties that have gone into government and haven't made it out the other side in one piece. And so that was weighing very heavily upon us. And so this does give us the ability to retain a bit of our distinctiveness.
Yes, although you will be bound by collective responsibility in respect of the portfolios you hold.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you wouldn't expect us to speak out against the government in the areas that we are actually working on.
No.
And of course, there will be a number of areas where we have to build quite a lot of mutual support. And of course, we would be supporting those initiatives that we were a part of developing.
So what can you tell us about the nature of the roles that your team will pick up on ministerial posts? I know that I'm not going to get exact portfolios, but can you give us some of the areas and some broad brushes about what you'll be doing?
Yeah, well, look, it's not going to come as a massive surprise. The 3 things that we campaigned on in the course of the election campaign were to make New Zealand a world leader in the fight against global climate change, to restore and replenish our forests and our birds and our rivers, and to end poverty. And so we have a suite of portfolios that allow us to make real progress on those goals.
Right, so there'll be, without mentioning the specific portfolios, the ministerial responsibility will be in those areas of climate change and poverty eradication.
Yes, and also in the areas relating to restoring our forests and our rivers and our birds as well.
What are you feeling about the prospects of working with Winston Peters?
I'm looking forward to the experience. I had to sort of lean pretty heavily on my colleagues in the Labour Party who worked with him during the 2005 to 2008 Parliament when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs and under Helen Clark. And their experience of him as a minister is that he was constructive, that he worked hard, he was very professional, and he had the full support of his department. And so, I'm taking their word for it that when in government, he does a good job.
He's never made it through a term, though, has he, as a minister?
No, but I think...
So this is his 4th time.
Yeah, look, I think...
Three strikes he fell. Do you think he's going to make it this time?
Yeah, I do. And I think that part of what he is trying to do with this, I mean, this has been fairly widely commented on, is to secure a legacy beyond himself for the New Zealand First Party. And I respect that. And of course, he's learned a lot of lessons over the years as well. And one of the things that I know is important to him is that we have a stable and responsible government that can go the whole distance. And so that was one of the barriers that we had to overcome, was to say, yes, we are in this for the long term as well.
In a speech and in an attack which I think was sanctioned by you, correct me if I'm wrong, your co-leader at the time, Tere Ture, said, quote, that I think he has had a very racist approach to immigration. I mean, she effectively called him a racist. This was 3 months ago.
Yeah, look,
Do you agree with that?
We've had, some differences, particularly on immigration policy, and one of the things that we have to navigate in our government is how to manage that.
Do you know what you've signed up to for immigration?
what the Labour Party have done, and I think have done an admirable job over the course of the last couple of weeks of the negotiations, is to make sure that there is nothing in the New Zealand First Agreement that is inconsistent with anything that is in ours, and vice versa. And so they've managed to do that.
So do you know what the immigration policy? Do you know what the immigration policy is?
No, I don't.
So it's an interesting situation, isn't it? Because you've signed up and you guys have all ratified this agreement, but you don't actually know what the policy is on something that your former co-leader was very concerned about and said it was a racist approach. You don't even know what it is.
I do know that the Labour Party have managed to come to a solution on that that is not inconsistent with Green Party policy and the stance that we've taken. So it sounds like there's been a bit of give and take. Actually, if you look at the history of MMP, those agreements are always negotiated in parallel, and there have never actually been in the whole history of MMP kind of 3 or 4 party talks, and so those agreements become public once the agreements are signed.
What are you looking forward to most about becoming a minister? It's a big moment for the Green Party.
Yes, it's an historic moment for us, actually. I first joined the Green Party when I was 16 in 1990, which was the first year that they stood as the Green Party in a general election. And it has been a very long journey, 27 years, to get to this point where we have ministers and are able to work on those areas that are important to us. So I'm delighted to be leading the Green Party into government for the first time, and really excited to start working on those things that we've campaigned on.
Thanks very much, and again, congratulations on your upcoming roles, and for those of your colleagues as well. We appreciate your time. It's James Shaw, who is to be a minister in this new government, and he's, of course, the leader of the Green Party. 13-8.
We can go back to our political editor, Jane Patterson, now, who's been she's been with us the whole time and has been listening to those interviews with James Shaw and Jacinda.